Welcome back. This third segment here is going to be short. There isn't a whole lot to talk about. One thing in particular, at the conclusion of the last video where I had the still shots, the sharp-eyed among you might have noticed that I did not end up using the eraser that I recommended in a case of where the end of the shank wasn't dead level. You didn't want the weight slipping. And when I actually got into doing the work, I realized that the amount of weight involved in this particular instance, it got a little treacherous, and the last thing you want is to set that weight down and find out you're off center and it tips, and then the wet glue on the shank, it flies off and you get glue everywhere. You got a mess in your hands. So for those cases, I came up with something that I should have told you about in the previous go around but forgot. And that is a piece of plexiglass, clear, that is got some masking tape on one side and a dot in the center. And how this is used is that you can very clearly see where the dot goes. Now, I don't know if you can exactly on the video here, but in real life, it is transparent enough that you can always get that dot right in the middle, and then it weighs practically nothing. You then back away and take this weight, and it is exactly the same size. The square is the same size as the diameter of this bushing. And that results in you always having a target. Now, if you've got something like this going on a little bit off, it's much more difficult with perspective in real life than you would think. And if you get it off just a little bit, it's going to tip on you. So as an insurance policy, have something like this that's dead center, and then visually you have no problem at all putting a circle in a square. You just check two of the four sides, set it down, you're good to go. So that's what I actually ended up doing, and that's why the photo looks a little bit different than the eraser that I recommended earlier in the same video. All right, so this video set was not intended to cover the full spectrum of the processes or techniques used on this particular recovery or rescue, whatever you want to call it. But here's the final result, just so you know, to complete the story, so to speak. A stem was made that is effectively identical to the original in all dimensions and such as that. It's not difficult to make something that looks like a master made it if you've got the original to copy from. It's coming up with them in the first place is the hard part. But you just have the original in hand and take away all the material from the rod stock that doesn't look like the original, and you'll end up with a copy. So that's that. And at the end of the previous video, there were some shots of the stummel sitting in this leather loop, and that was to show that even though it had not been refinished at that point in time, it was still quite difficult to see the fusion line or the crack line or whatever you want to call it, because the excess epoxy had been removed using a little push tool. And again, you've got as many of those as you can come up with. I recommend a plastic as opposed to wood. It won't leave any fibers behind. And then you just have an assortment of them in different diameters, different sizes. Here's one that I actually used. You can see there's even a little tiny bit of black still on it. And you just go along, and wherever necessary, and with a slight twisting motion, and a little bit of an uplift push, and you just follow the line and remove the epoxy wherever it appears and leave behind only what's squashed between the two pieces of wood. Well, if you got the thing lined up properly and compressed properly, that line is only going to be 1 to 2 thousandths of an inch thick. So it's practically invisible to start with, and then you texture it ever so slightly with any one of a million tools. You just have it. It depends on the job, but a rotary tool at an extremely low speed. Again, I recommend one of these Fortums that just goes around as slow as you want it to go, and then follow the line and texture it a little bit, and then go through with a standard refinish, and you can't find the crack. I know where it was and what I'm looking for, and with magnification I still can't find it. So it's effectively back to new. And finally, in the early part of this, in the first video, I said I wouldn't know whether or not a stainless steel tube was necessary, and that depends on individual cases. In a very narrow, thin pencil shank, you always want to use it. In a massive shank, it's unnecessary, and this one was kind of in between, or I finally decided it on the side of unnecessary. So there is no metal in this, and I'll take one quick digression here. The reason you use metal when fusing a pipe like this with a glue joint is not because of the strength of the tube. Most people think that's what it's for. If you use the right kind of glue, it's already going to be stronger than the wood. So the tube doesn't do anything structurally. What it does do is it prevents moisture during smoking from a capillary action, a surface tension migration up against the glue line, and it'll kind of wick it up in that space. And if the wood itself gets softened by moisture, which, as you know, it does, like pretty much anything else, you soak it in water, and then it can pull away from the glue and or break near the glue line. In any event, it's rare. It has happened, and it's always been in the case of pencil shanks that I've ever seen. It's not something to obsess about or worry about, but in terms of as an insurance policy, there's no reason not to put it in there unless you have an aesthetic objection. But in any event, I told you in the beginning that I would either use a tube in this or not, depending, and there you go. The decision was not to use it. So this turned out really nice. It was effectively 3 pieces in the palm of your hand that had no functional value at all. Throw them in a wastebasket, and now we've got arguably a new pipe again in terms of usage and aesthetically. Now, to collectors of high-end pipes, it would matter to them that the original maker didn't make the stem and that the shank's been repaired and all that. But that's up to the collecting market to keep track of that and to decide how much it matters to them. My job and your job, so to speak, is just to make things back to as new as possible. And in this particular case, I think we pulled it off. So that's it for now. I'll append several still photos to the end of this video of this pipe so you can get a closer look at I'm going to zoom in on the join here and a couple other things so that you just have a static reference to look at if you're interested. So that's it until the next project, whatever that turns out to be. As always, thanks for tuning in, and until next time.